Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Thoughts on the Edge. As we promised, we're going to be back a little bit more regularly. And so we hope now that you see our efforts at consistency. And we thank you again for your patience. I'm here with my friend and co-host, Reinaldo Torres. And today's discussion, kind of going off the last one, is about identity. How we make identity, what is identity? You know, it's a term that's used often, but I don't think people define it enough, right? Or even take the time to think about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what today's conversation is going to be about. And as always, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and let us know if you want to join in on future discussions or leave comments. So without further ado, here we go again. Question for you.
All right.
On the spotlight last time, right? On the hot seat. But I think you do well on the hot seat, so there's no problem with being on the hot seat again.
Okay.
When we talk about identity, or when you hear identity, what do you think about? Like, what's identity to you? How would you define it? How would you describe it, etc.?
You know, there was a good friend of mine actually last week who he posts a lot of thought-provoking content on his Instagram. And it's funny that we're talking about identity because I will bring up the quote that he talked about. Let me find it here. Sorry, you guys, 1 second.
This is part of the unscripted nature, right?
Yeah, part of the unscripted nature is.
As you guys can see, we really don't script this. We really don't script this.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So let me find that quote because it was a really, really good one. Here it is. He says, "Beauty is a reflection of health. We are all attracted to beauty because we instinctively know to value health, wholeness, goodness, well-being. True beauty, not superficial, skin-deep beauty or aesthetic illusions, is holistic. Being physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy. We can all be beautiful and we can all become more beautiful, but it is not a given. It is a choice to do the work to realize the vision of who we are, of who we were made to be. What do you think? Have you tended to look at beauty as being fixed or in your control? Have you thought of beauty on the outside and inside as being separate things?" Josh Murray, if you're out there listening to this, I just quoted you, one of your posts. So to add into that, when I think of beauty, when I think of identity, I often think of it as not just skin deep, but your characteristics, how you carry yourself, how you converse with people, and just your overall morale. When I think of, because that's all a part of your identity. It's not just skin deep. It's emotions. It's your thoughts. It's deeper than that. So that's what I attribute identity to, because you can have a wonderful appearance, but your mindset and your thoughts can be a totally different thing. And that's something that I have come to appreciate more as I've gotten older. So, yeah.
It's very interesting how you start off with that quote. Something that caught my attention there is beauty is a reflection of health.
Yeah.
So Michel Foucault, for anybody who likes philosophy, The History of Sexuality, he wrote these series of books called The History of Sexuality, where he examines concepts of sexuality, of gender, of the sexual acts themselves, from the Greeks to the present in a way.
Yeah.
And his whole work is that's what it focuses on. He's showing and breaking down how when people talk about beauty, they think about health. So they think about medical kind of things, right? Especially procreation. So it's interesting. And it's also dangerous because that could fit into eugenics. Right? That could fit into, you know, the Nazi, that's what the Nazi program was about, right? It was about finding the best looking, also the healthiest, right? People on the planet in order to procreate some type of a master race, right? So I think it's interesting how beauty is tied to health. I like to think of beauty as brokenness, actually. So I've written on that that actually brokenness is where we find commonality, because nobody is 100% whole or healthy.
Yeah.
That's not, everybody has something, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's you know, something going on here, something going on here, something, you know, going on around us. Nobody is whole 100%. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
So I think in that brokenness is where we find beauty. So for me, identity, very similar to you, it transcends phenotype. It transcends our bodies, right? At the same time, we are embodied beings, right? And so people and society will label and categorize based on our appearances.
Yeah.
And that limits, right, who we can become. And so the key is, to me, to understand identity as extremely complex, as extremely layered. There's multiple facets to our identity. As you were saying,
Yeah.
right? It's not just how you look, it's how you carry yourself, how you talk to others, your thoughts. And so to me, identity is that one space where you can kind of mess around with categories.
Yeah.
And be fluid,
Yeah.
right, in a way, and just resist these categorizations that people place upon us.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's so funny because, and so all of you guys out there listening, again, we appreciate your comments. We appreciate your thoughts, you know, when we do this. But I'm gonna open up sort of a dialogue for everybody listening out there. Have you ever walked into, you know, whether you walk into a restaurant, you walk into a place of employment for a job interview, or just anywhere you walk, and you get the stares or you get the looks from people? You know, how does that, you know, that must, you know, if you're a person who's really deep into that, you might give them a dirty look back, or you might just kind of ignore it or brush it off. But how does that really, you know, I wonder oftentimes what goes through the average person's mind when they're walking through the mall, when they're walking through the grocery store, when they're walking into a job interview, and they have, you know, they're just being themselves in their mind, they're being themselves, but the other person passing the look on to them is like, huh, there's something different about this person. You know, it's just a thought that comes into my head. I mean, I get it all the time. Um, as most of you out there know, or most of you that don't know, that might just be, this might be your first time watching. I was born with a disability. I was born with, I had a stroke at birth. And so unless you are really like magnifying glass close to me, you have to be really, really close to know that there is something wrong. Because though, you know, based on the way I speak, based on my physical attributes, you never know that there was anything wrong. It's one of those, I guess you can say I got lucky to where my face wasn't drooped or anything like that, you know, but there is a superficial issue with the way I walk. I walk with a slight limp. And, you know, of course, I have limited use of the right side of my arm. So I get the looks all the time too. And I get the questions even. I get the question of, hey, what's wrong with the right side? And automatically people, there's this defense of, oh no, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, because I guess they're thinking in their mind, oh my God, I just outed this kid that he's gonna snap him. He's gonna say something. And it's like, no. It's an exhausting conversation, but it does help, I guess, bridge that gap of identity. Because I guess in the other person's mind, there's something wrong with you. There's something fundamentally wrong with you if you have a physical disability. They think if it's physical, it's also mental. So some of them ask the question because they generally do want to understand what's wrong. But then I think that there are other people that they just, you know, they see that level of indifference and some of them just can't comprehend it. So to you, CJ, I mean, have you ever encountered that in terms of identity, and how did you deal with it?
I think that's a very powerful thing you said, specifically about the gaze, right? So others' gazes, you know, and again, Foucault has done a lot of work on this. Toni Morrison also, in her book, Playing in the Dark, I believe it's called.
I
Um,
think I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, powerful book. And she talks about the
Yeah,
gaze, the power they both do, Foucault and Morrison talk about the power of the gaze to discipline you, right?
yeah,
To the point where you self-discipline yourself. And this is what we're talking about, right? So it's like you walk into a place and given your past experiences, thanks to others' gazes, right? And judgments,
they're
you
staring.
already are thinking, oh, this is what they're thinking about me, right? And so you have to modify the way you are in some ways in
Yeah,
order to stop that gaze. Does that make sense? I
yeah.
think that's
The stare, to stop because it's like, and I always come back to this story. But a couple of years ago, I was in Aventura Mall with my grandparents, and we were having lunch. And after we finished the meal, my grandmother went to the restroom to freshen up, and my grandfather walked to one of the stores. So I'm sitting there finishing up my lunch, and this woman behind me purposely waited until they departed the table to walk up behind me and ask me, literally tap me on the shoulder, and she went, "Excuse me." And I said, "Yes, of course, being polite." She said, "Forgive me for staring, but are you mixed?" And in that moment, I said, okay, this can either go one or two ways. Are you talking mixed as in ethnicity? Are you talking mixed because you see two African Americans that can easily pass for a Caucasian man and woman standing with a darker African American? Like, what are you implying? It's just one of those questions that I was really taken aback by, but it also, people really do not understand identity. There are some people that just do not get that because you look a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean that there is something fundamentally wrong.
well, this is what I'm saying. It's damn if you do, damn if you don't, right? So it's to try to conform to others' expectations,
Yeah.
well, it'll just never work, and I know
It will
people who
drive
have
you
done it.
crazy if you try to put yourself in that box. And I'm part people cutting you off, but it will drive you nuts if you try to conform to that ideology. You will literally be you will literally just be driven crazy.
Because you're going to be living your entire life thinking, what are they thinking about me, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I think, of course, we all do. We all are thinking about
Yeah.
these. This is the disciplinary gaze that we're talking about. It's like we have
There.
been trained since we were kids
Mm-hmm.
to care about what other people think about us, right? Because that leads to inclusion for economic opportunity. So jobs is one clear thing, right? It leads to economic advancement. It leads to social advancement, your social status, right? Can you fit into a country club? Can you fit into a yacht club? Can you
Right.
do these things, right? In
Right.
academia, to answer your question that you asked, I have felt the stairs when it comes to my tattoos, right? Because it's not necessarily the norm to see PhD students or to see professors
Yeah.
or researchers with tattoos.
Right.
So to me, it's interesting how my body itself teaches in the classroom. It shatters these perceptions,
Yeah.
right? And one of my best friends, who comes from a Jewish background, we met in law school, and he told me straight up. He goes, I at first I kind of judged you because you had tattoos, and then I got to know you, and these perceptions that I grew up with about people who have tattoos went away, right? And I saw how brilliant you are, and then that made me think, wow, so now it's because of my intelligence or perceived intelligence that
Yeah.
I'm worth something, right?
Yeah.
And so it comes down to the point of, I don't want to necessarily present myself as anything in terms of getting people's approval, or that sense of self-worth comes deep within.
I tend not to do that. And self-confessed, I was once one of those people that wore my heart on my sleeve a lot, and I went around carrying that weight of worrying about what a person was going to say about me, or how they felt, or how they perceived me. And as you get older, you realize that's exhausting, and I really don't give two sugar two. I really do not give 2 spoons of sugar honey iced tea. What that what you made it has no effect on me at all. And there's just something so freeing about it when you just let go and just be like, all right, I don't care because it's almost as if like, we spend all of our waking moments, some of us, worried about what another person thinks of us, what they're going to think about us. And you're worrying, you're afraid to move to the next step in your life because you're worried about this. You're worried about people and their perceptions, and they're not going to give a crap about you when you leave here. Think about this for a second, guys. Think about this for a second. And I don't need to preach, but when someone passes away,
No, go ahead and preach. This is what it's. Go ahead.
when someone passes away, whether it be a dear friend, it be a dear family member, or somebody you ever notice that the typical moment of that, maybe for the first couple days, there's sorrow, there's sadness, there's crying, there's all the emotions. But about 2 weeks later, all of that's gone. Like that person is literally a distant memory. So you mean to tell me you're gonna forego getting your doctorate, you're gonna forego buying your house, you're gonna go forego buying your car, you're scared to start your business, you're scared to write your book, you're scared to ask someone for help because you are worried about what they're going to say. Newsflash, guys, they don't give a crap about you. They're doing what they're going to do anyway. So you should do.
I 100% agree with you, and I think most of us fall into scripts, right? So it's, in my research, I like to talk about scripts and narratives.
Mhm.
And I think that's the key. I think many of us live in scripts without
Yeah.
even realizing, right? So even the things we like
Yeah.
might not necessarily be the things we like. They might be the things we've been taught to like, right?
Yeah.
And even starting with that quote on beauty as a reflection of health, that's one example, right? Of being told, yes, this person looks healthy, that means they're beautiful. And subconsciously, that means, possibility for partnership and, if you're heterosexual, procreation, right?
Right.
So it's interesting how that plays into it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the more we care about fitting our own scripts in order to please others,
Yeah.
the more we lose whatever uniqueness we have.
Yeah.
Right? Because the way things are moving, it seems like everybody's a carbon copy of everyone else, right? It's like everybody wants the same things, does, and again, generalizing here, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but my friend groups are very diverse. They have diverse
Yeah.
interests, and they're people that I call weird in a good way. They're weirdos,
Yeah.
and I think that's a beautiful thing. Somebody who comes to mind is Kathy Acker. She was a novelist,
Mhm.
and she was part of the punk genre of the emerging punk genre of novel writing, right?
Mhm.
And she herself was tattooed, and she had the crew cut, um, and this was back in the 70s and 80s, right? And so to hear about how people used to just perceive her, it's like, oh, who's that? And then she was the author of the novel that people came to hear about. So it's the shattering of perceptions that I think
Playing with
is
people's
key to
perception.
playing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think is a lot of fun because, like you say, they judge the book by the cover, and then when they actually open the book and they actually get to know the person, they're like, huh, this guy is not as he's not as bad as I thought he was. And you're like, it happens a lot, I think. It's the same thing with me. A lot of people, I'm usually the conversation starter. Um, Normally the person that will initiate the conversation. And my story always comes up, and a lot of people think that it's me. Um, well, other people don't care about that, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people, they ask the question, like I said earlier, they ask the question about my condition and what happened because they generally want to understand why. And I get it from my niece, I get it from my nephews, I get it from everyone. I was at the bank the other day, and the new teller that was there, she had been she had been helping me the past couple times I was there, and finally one day she looked over and she said, I don't mean to offend you. And I could literally see the tension and the tears getting ready to well up in her eyes. She was like, I don't mean to offend you. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Maybe I shouldn't ask. I said, ask the question. Ask what you want to ask, because I probably already know what you're going to ask. And she says, well, were you born with the arm that way? And I said, yes. She said, but you don't carry yourself like most people. And I said, yeah, well, it takes a lot of practice. um, because I think she generally, because a lot of people, again, the subject of identity, when people have these conditions, they tend to just close themselves off and just they feel sorry for themselves. She said she never met someone as outgoing as me, someone that literally dressed as well as me, and I'm literally in a t-shirt and jeans and a pair of sneakers, and she's like, I've never seen someone dressed like you. And I'm like, wow. Again, there are people that really do not understand the subject of identity. It happens.
Yeah, or they again assume, right, a very simplistic identity based off of, again, the narratives that we hear in media. Either you're characterized just by your race or ethnicity or disability. And as we've been talking about, and Judith Butler mentions this all the time too in identity theory, identities are fluid. Number one, they change over time.
Yeah.
So anybody who tells you, yes, I've been this way since, they're lying to you. It's a stylization.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think we need to, I don't know, remain enigmatic and elusive, in some ways. Why do we always have to reveal everything about ourselves, right? When we're trying to figure out who we are.
I think it has a lot to do with just the way we're taught and what we're programmed. We're conditioned almost to a certain degree of, you have to reveal everything about yourself. Like, you have to have your emotions, your faults, your victories, everything on display for this other person. And it's like, but is that person really telling me everything about themselves? So why do I have to write the great dissertation on, everything that I've ever done? It just does not make sense. It's like, you get, and we're kind of falling back on the subject of, talking a little bit about relationships here, but I heard someone say the other day, you ever start talking to a person, like, when you're talking to that person and you're getting to know that person, suddenly this person wants all of these requirements. The person has to be a God-fearing man. The person has to be a God-fearing man or woman, has to drive a certain caliber car, has to have perfect teeth, has to, have zero points on their license, perfect driving record, and all of these things. They have a laundry list of things that you have to have in order to date them. But it's like, do you possess even a quarter of the things that you are requiring of this person? You have this, again, this perception, this identity of the perfect person that you want. But are you really striving to be the perfect counterpart?
And I think something crucial that you hit upon here is, so I think about this phrase in philosophy that we've all heard, know thyself, I don't think that means to necessarily know thyself perfectly, right? Or even to give an account of oneself. I think what this means is desires are where they come from. Because as you said, this laundry list, right? This checklist, it reads as a checklist.
Yeah.
That's what society tells us.
So what I was going to say is that people have, again, on the subject of identity, people have this perception of you, this perception of how they want you to be. And the moment that you break that barrier, the moment that you elevate yourself, you change one thing about that identity that they've molded for you, they fundamentally cannot handle that. Example, if you have been an employee anywhere for 1, 2, 5 years, and you decide in that second year that, hey, I'm going to break out, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I'm going to start my own business. What do you notice that happens? People have this, again, this perception, oh my God, CJ is an educator. Now, he's been an educator for 5 years. Now he wants to leave all of that behind and start his own business. What is he thinking? Are you crazy? Benefits and pension, and suddenly all of the things that you already know, people are suddenly filling your head with ideas of, oh, well, why you shouldn't do this? Are you? And it's like, uh, you do realize I'm my own person, right? You do realize that I have my own goals, my own dreams. If I'm always stuck in this perception of what you want me to be, how am I ever going to be truly happy, truly self-fulfilled if I'm always
Absolutely.
conforming to your
Absolutely.
perception?
Absolutely. So what I would say there is absolutely. So people want to classify in order to understand.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I believe in order to control, right? To control
Yeah,
you, to control perceptions of you. And by being enigmatic, being elusive in some ways, you become dangerous because then people don't know where to place you, right?
yeah.
People don't know
And when
what to
they can't,
think about you.
yeah, and when they can't, when you don't allow them to do that, that's when you are that independent person, that's when you become a threat. That's when you become a problem. That's when I become a problem because it's like, oh, well, we can't group him the way we group the others, or we can't, you know, we can't do that.
Right. Right. And then part of this playfulness, or what they call the trickster, right,
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. You can be elusive, but at the same time, when it comes time to fit a certain mold, you can do that too, in a way that's, again, that what you so it's all about knowing what you're doing, right? It's about your
Yeah.
mental process. And it's existentialists, people don't really, they have a hard time understanding existentialists, because when
Mhm.
when you realize the power that you have and the ultimate freedom that you have within your mind, right, to shape yourself,
Yeah.
shape your surroundings, shape your reality, people don't know what to do with that.
I don't
It's
know. It's like with a lot of my writing, I purposely put the characters in situations where it breaks that barrier. Sometimes it works when you present it to other actors that you want to play that role. Sometimes it works. Sometimes they're like, "Oh hell yeah, can we start tomorrow?" But then there are others that they are so programmed and so caught up in worrying about what another person may think. If they're seen on camera,
Yeah. And I think another thing that you just, and we've reached our time limit here, which is incredible. It's
yeah,
it's incredible how these conversations just take off. That's the beauty of it.
yeah,
But I think I like to end on this note. I've heard many friends say, "Oh, I'm not normal," or "I don't feel normal." I'm
hmm
thinking to myself, even that term "normal," right, and
what does that mean?
normalization, it's such a, to me, normal and perfect are probably two of the worst words in our dictionary.
Yeah,
So all I'm saying is, to those of you out there who don't feel normal, continue being you. This
yeah.
is not, these are all scripts that we're playing with, and the imagination really is the limit here.
What I will say is own who you are. I will end with own who you are. Be proud of it. You
I
know,
think that's a great send off.
God created you to be different. If everybody looked the exact same, if everybody drove the exact same car, if lived in the exact same color house with the exact same layout, it'd be pretty boring around here,
I think so. I think it
you
would be,
know? So
yeah, it would be robotic, right? And
it'd be robotic. It wouldn't be different. And there's power in it. There's beauty in being different. There's beauty in taking the path that
right.
others wouldn't dare take.
And of course, order is needed in order to have disorder, right? So
Yeah,
this is what I'm saying, that it's not like we're trying to escape complete order here, because that's impossible. It really is.
right,
But within your mind, you
right.
can play with this so-called order and kind of
Yeah,
shape it to your liking, and in some ways use your identity, use your stylization, your aesthetics, even, right, as a performance.
right.
And so I wish we had more time to discuss even that phrase, be authentic, be yourself. I agree with
Yeah.
you. It's very complicated, right? To be
Yeah.
authentic. And sometimes being authentic does not necessarily pay off just because, again, you have to be careful who's using your authenticity, right? And
Yes.
so, but with that, friends, we've come to a close again, and we look
Yes.
forward to your comments, your questions. Subscribe if you are enjoying these podcasts. For the next one, we're going to have a conversation on gun rights. We're going to have somebody who is for gun rights, someone who's against gun rights, and then we'll be moderating that discussion. So we look forward to our next podcast. Reinaldo, closing words.
Like I said, thank you guys. Continue to be you. Continue to be the best of whatever you are, and just
All
be
right.
yourself. Be yourself.
Yep.
Never let anyone discount you. Never put yourself in a position where you feel discounted. Um, always stick true to your value, and and in continuing that path, you will find peace. You will find happiness.
Beautiful. So we'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Signing off.